Sometimes, when you're DMing, things just don't go the way you think they will. You can spend all week planning a bunch of cool and fun encounters, only to have your party 180 and go a completely different route. This is what happened during this session. Let's get into the campaign diary for Session 3 of the Abomination Vaults. Hi, I'm Skull, and welcome back to the third installment of my group's playthrough of Pathfinder's Abomination Vaults. Before we get into the session itself, let's talk about the planning I did that ultimately went unused. Even though it didn't end up getting used by myself, it could still prove useful to you if your players make an accidental beeline for Boss Scrong. When we left off, our heroes had taken a direct path towards Boss Scrong. They were unaware of this, but since many of the Mitflit encounters were still undiscovered, it seemed prudent to plan a reaction to their boss's defeat. Due to the upscaling we did, we still had several Mitflits and many giant insects spread across the first floor of the dungeon. Considering the repercussions of Boss Scrong's death, I could see several potential outcomes. Option 1. Boss Scrong and all the Mitflits in the room are killed, and as such the remaining Mitflits never learn of his death, and the encounters play out as normal. Option 2. After Boss Scrong's death, a surviving Mitflit flees and warns the others of what has happened. The surviving Mitflit population flees into the swamps, never to be seen again. Option 3. The escaping Mitflit tells the others of Boss Scrong's death, and they make the risky play of returning below to the servants' quarters where they are killed off-screen. This then sets up the Morlocks as a more dangerous threat. Each of these options seemed perfectly viable, however, I still wanted a climactic end to the Mitflit story in the form of a final showdown. I didn't see a world in which the Mitflits valiantly died avenging their dead boss, so having the remaining insects all swarm the heroes while they fled seemed most appropriate. I calculated the threat level and experience of all the remaining insects, and toned them down a bit so it would be manageable in a single battle, and settled on 4 Mudflicker maggots, 2 giant flies, and 1 giant scorpion. I planned these to attack in waves, giving the heroes more time to handle each threat in turn and keeping the action economy in check. So, this was the plan. Assuming the heroes would begin the next session by battling Boss Scrong, we had all the adaptations prepared to handle the change in story. As you've probably clocked on, though, this is not what happened. Let's get into the session itself. Picking up directly after the Battle of the Sinkhole Room, our heroes spent a short amount of time healing and exploring. May discovered the hidden staircase below the collapsed floor, but opted to keep this information to herself. Milo ascertained the destruction was caused by powerful spells, and the group discussed the potential of lingering magic.
There's a lot of magic here. Where it was. Same as outside. I wonder if there's any place here that isn't brought low by powerful magic.
I have to say, based on the glow, it's pretty magical here anyway, I'd presume.
I still feel like we should be wary of anything that lingers. Sufficiently potent magic can stay around for a long, long time.
Even beyond when the use is gone.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure. Magical artifacts and traps and all manner of magical effects linger beyond the death of the caster.
Hmm. Wait, so you're saying this tower could be trapped with magic?
Yeah,
They began discussing how to pass through the doors squished against the edge of the sinkhole, but before any plans could be enacted, some confusion caused the group to turn around and begin clearing the rest of the floor. After watching the footage back, I've realized the group thought that this led to the lighthouse proper, and wanted to make sure nothing would follow up behind them. I didn't clock this in the moment, otherwise I would have corrected them, as I think this miscommunication is what caused them to backtrack away from Boss Scrong. Either way, this was the choice that made this week's planning ultimately become irrelevant. Using the rationale of this door is closest, the group headed for the maggot stable. Ornifex listened at the door before opening it, they're learning, but heard nothing of note. With no additional information to act on, Ornifex headed right in. As a highly curious person, Ornifex rushed over to the dead frog, causing the maggots to burst free and wriggle hungrily towards her. Initiative was rolled. Sesto and his eidolon Tiny rushed to help, beginning the assault on the maggots. May followed up by entering her stoked flame stance and throwing a foxfire projectile that sadly missed. A nasty max damage bite from one of the maggots nearly halved Ornifex's HP, but luckily she avoided the following grab. Rock rushed to her aid and stabbed the attacking maggot, causing it to regurgitate and sicken him in return. Ornifex made use of the step action to scooch over and blast all three maggots with a haunting hymn spell. This was the first time the step action has been utilized in our game. Hooray for learning. In retaliation, the maggot bit into her, dealing 9 damage and leaving Ornifex very close to death. Again, she avoids the following grapple. Milo did his usual thaumaturge goodness and exploited vulnerability, after which he slayed the first of the 3 maggots. Milo was bitten for his troubles, but also avoided the incoming grab. Sesto and Tiny landed a successful slam on a maggot, and thankfully both Tiny and Milo avoided becoming sickened by the following regurgitation. May tripped a maggot, causing it to writhe aimlessly as she beat it unconscious. The last living maggot bit, grabbed, and gnawed Rock, munching slowly through his depleting health. Rock wasn't a fan of that and promptly critically hit the last remaining maggot, making it very dead indeed. Healing, vomiting, and exploring commenced as the maggot corpses lay strewn across the room. Once the group were ready, they moved into the dining room and encountered their first ever haunt. Let's talk about haunts and how they're presented to new players. Like most groups, we began our adventure with the beginner's box. This is supposed to teach players most of the rules they'll need to play the game, and the DM how to run them. Something it doesn't contain, though, is a haunt. As such, when my players encountered their first haunt, they were very unsure of how to approach it. I tried my best to explain the intention of a haunt without directly giving them the answers, but due to a mix of acting in initiative, yet not having a direct target, my players very quickly became stuck with choice paralysis, and most of them began choosing to skip their turns rather than try anything creative. I think this is due to the rules heavy nature of Pathfinder. So far, whenever they've wanted to try anything, they've had a very specific action to use, whereas this time, being told to think creatively and try whatever came to mind left them feeling a little overwhelmed. With Paizo reworking the beginner's box soon, I think the inclusion of a haunt is kind of crucial for new players. I offered to break immersion and talk my players through this first haunt as a tutorial example, but the general consensus was that they'd like it to play out and at least get to see what the haunt does on its turn before they accept that offer. We rolled initiative and triggered the reaction that begins the haunt. Rock critically succeeded, and as such was given one possible answer of how to defeat this encounter. Milo, Sesto, and Tiny all became frightened, causing the haunt to continue. This is kind of where the problems began. Due to Rock having a clue of what to do, the rest of the players began struggling for ideas and instead began skipping their turns in frustration to just let Rock deal with it.
I'm sorry, I don't really know what to do. I think I will pass and give on to Sister.
I'm also very lost.
The haunt acted and assaulted Milo with its routine. The action economy is quite unclear here. This specific haunt said that the routine took one action. As a DM, I had no idea whether this meant the haunt used one action 3 times to account for the 3 actions creatures would get in combat, or whether it only had one action and this is what it was for. If it's the latter, I'm not sure why they needed to state the amount of actions at all. It's all rather confusing, and truthfully, I'm still not 100% sure about haunt rules. In the moment, I went for the one routine is all it gets, and that seems to be correct. If anyone could leave a comment explaining haunts in basic terms, then I would be super grateful. Getting to Rock's turn, he used the information he had gained and attempted to intimidate the kobolds. His first attempt failed, but due to having 3 actions, he tried again with his second action. This felt a bit odd, but I'm not sure if there's any mechanical reason this wouldn't work. His second attempt worked, and the haunt ended. Overall, the haunt was a pretty frustrating encounter, and I don't think it's given my players, or myself, a particularly good first impression. The rules seem obscure and honestly are quite hard to find any clarity in. After the encounter ended, I decided to pause the game and explain how the haunts work, how to handle them, what they are supposed to do as players, and what they do to the players. Hopefully, this means the next one will be a more enjoyable encounter. In the search for loot, the party just happened to remove all the kobold bones from the rubble, which means the haunt has been permanently ended, which is lucky for them. Moving on, our heroes spent an hour resting and healing before continuing their journey. The next stop was the giant fly room. As soon as they opened the door, the first giant fly zoomed towards them in anticipation of its next meal. Sesta was first to act, having Tiny charge into the room and pounce at the fly, but unfortunately missed, allowing the fly to avoid the swat and flee into the larger room. Milo failed to exploit vulnerability, so charged in and swung wildly, missing his attacks too. The second giant fly entered the fray from the trapdoor above, while the first fly bit into Sesto. May entered her stoked flame stance and rushed in towards the new fly, smashing it with her fist. Her reward for this was immediately getting bitten and infected with flybox. After infecting its assailant, the fly joined the battle in the larger room. Rock tried his best to help, but a failed feint and a missed attack left him unable to sway the battle. Ornifex made use of her signature needle darts, but sadly only impacted the distant wall as the fly darted and dodged around the room. It was at this point that the two maggots hidden in the rafters woke up and flopped down into the room to partake in this meal. Sesto had Tiny pounce and bite into the newly arrived maggot, tearing it apart and killing it instantly. Milo ran for one of the flies and sunk his short sword into the insect. During his second swing, the fly avoided the swat and darted for Sesto. The momentum of the impact caused an especially nasty attack on Sesto, as the fly repeatedly bit and nipped at him. Happy with its work, and wanting space, it retreated outside through the broken western wall. May tried and failed to trip the maggot at her feet, but did pummel the maggot with her fists. It vomited and then promptly died of its wounds. The giant fly still in the room was now surrounded, so fled back into its home where it found Tiny alone, and looking like an appealing meal. It bit into Tiny, racking Sesto with pain. Rock ran the retreating fly down, attempting and failing yet another feint. Disheartened, he pulled back to give the space to his team. Ornifex followed after Rock and scorched the fly with a blast of moonbeam, leaving it burned and blind. While Tiny could have probably easily finished this wounded insect, in a Hail Mary, Sesto augmented him with Evolution Surge, causing Tiny to become unnaturally fast. Tiny bolted around the large room in a wide arc and slammed into the fly by the ruined wall. The impact was immense, causing the fly to crumple apart and be sent soaring into the dark, swampy waters beyond. Milo cautiously approached with his shield raised, while analysing the fly's weaknesses to little avail. May rushed past Milo and with a resounding crack knocked the fly out of the air. It pulled itself to its feet and in a blind state attacked the air wildly. With a final flick of his rapier, Rock put the giant insect to rest, and peace was restored. The heroes proceeded to spend a good amount of time debating whether to climb up to the trapdoor above. They were hoping to find some treasure, but alas, all they found was a nice view of the night sky. This was helpful in allowing the heroes to triangulate their position, though, and locate which direction the lighthouse was in. It was at this point that our heroes finally decided to return to the starting point of this session and push on towards Boss Strong. Not that they knew he was waiting for them. Through a mixture of bouncing, climbing, and Sesto needing 20 attempts to climb out of the pit, the heroes gathered in the walkway. That's high for him.
Picture of what you look like.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, it's nearly finished.
And that only gives him a bonus.
The aid check you make
Okay.
statistically eventually. You have to, like, crit or something.
I believe.
Okay, 5 feet up. That's close enough for Rock to attempt to pull you up. So Rock, if you
I
make...
don't need rock. I'm fine.
Oh, he is fine. He makes it up. The 7-foot-tall skeleton stood unmoving before them, causing a great deal of hesitancy in Milo. Once Rock had navigated his way onto the walkway, his disdain for patience meant he strided forwards and toppled the statue with ease. I could tell a few of our heroes were a tad frustrated with his lack of caution, and this only grew as he immediately slammed open the awaiting doors. And so, the party finally met Boss Strong. Obviously, my initial plans were no longer relevant, as the party had now cleared enough of these initial rooms to allow for the dungeon to play out as normal. Yeah, that guy smirks, leaning back in his weird makeshift throne. You've finally arrived. I've been waiting for these heroes to emerge. I must say, I'm impressed that you discovered us.
You have the wrong people, buddy.
Don't threaten the man.
What do you mean?
I'm
Have
not
you not come
threatening
here
him.
to stop us in our schemes? I'm surprised that you figured us out before we actually did anything.
Do we have time to do
Wait,
anything? while
you
Rock's having a
wanted somebody to
conversation?
come and stop you?
Well, I assumed that my dastardly plan to use these giant insects to attack the pitiful town would attract attention. I decided to roleplay Boss Strong as a little stupider than he was probably intended. He regularly revealed secrets with his eagerness to appear mighty and would entirely misunderstand heroes when they tried to drop hints or speak subtly. Knowing that this would likely be a long encounter, we stopped the session after a brief introductory dialogue so that we could play out this scene in full next session. Overall, the session went well. It's always a shame when your plans as a DM fall through, but being adaptable and not trying to force things to happen will always lead to happier players. I'm beginning to feel that I was correct in my assumption that my players are going for a completionist approach to the dungeon, as this session was mostly clearing rooms they felt like they had missed. Perhaps I should lean into this gamified approach to the dungeon crawl. We'll see if they keep it up. As for the next session, it looks like we're finally getting our boss Scrong encounter. Whether this will be an extended roleplay and a negotiation or a fight is unclear. I'm going to let my players lead on that decision, and we'll only have Boss Scrong attack first if the players are overly aggressive or they make him feel like he has no choice. It's been a while since we've had some roleplay, so hopefully we can get a nice long conversation out of him first, either way. After this encounter, I'm honestly unsure what the next steps will be for the players. I can see them either returning to Atari with the information that Boss Scrong was dealt with, or continue clearing this first floor of the dungeon. Thanks for watching this campaign diary. If you're enjoying this series, then please like the video, subscribe to the channel so that more people get the chance to find these videos. I hope you have a great day and happy adventuring.